Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome everyone to our today's lecture on critically analyzing poem. Today we will explore the key steps involved in unlocking the layers of meaning within a poem. To illustrate all of those steps, we'll be focusing a very renowned poem by Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. So we'll be looking at the various steps involved in understanding and critically evaluating a poem, because most of the people who teach in the classroom are unaware of the fact that how to critically analyze a poem in a classroom. So it's very important to keep all of those things in your mind whenever you go and teach in your classroom. So I have charted out the step technique that can be followed in a classroom, that can be practice in the classroom for very easy, understandable approach for the students and teachers alike. And they can practice that approach in their classroom for very convenient and up-to-date use in the classroom. So we'll be looking at how the anatomy of a poem can be drawn, how we can map a poem with various kind of things that we'll be looking for in a poem. We'll be looking for the explanation, the key example, like Robert Frost is our primary example that we'll be having in our mind. We'll be focusing that what kind of mnemonic device can be used in a poem technique that could be memorized and adopted in any poem, especially the short poem, for easy understanding. The first step is to understand that what are these mnemonic devices. I'll be explaining this one, STIMMLRRR, because this one will be explained in our next slide. STIMMLRRR, I invented this STIMMLRRR. So STIMMLRRR is actually stands for different kind of things that we explain that we are looking in our poem. So we'll be looking for all of those things. When we talk about STIMMLRRR, we have corresponding letters that define different kind of items in poem. Like S stands for structure and poetic form. It is the physical layout of a poem. It's an organization of a poem. It includes the line breaks, it includes stanzas. So all of those things are present in the structure and the poetic form. It's very important to know, because readers or the students will be able to identify the rest of the things from this structure and poetic form alone. It's very important to know that whether he wrote in a quatrain, in couplet, in tercet, in pentavalent, etc. And it's very important to know about the rhyming pattern. Themes, very important. The what of the poem, it's the far overreaching ideas, universal ideas that are addressed to everyone. It includes those things that could be considered as of universal aspect, like love, harmony, peace, etc. So a poet may express the message with the usage of imagery, metaphors, and other literary devices while focusing on a major theme. So the next step is imagery. It refers to the sensory details, those sensory details that can be felt, like auditory and tactile descriptions. So these images help the reader to identify, to make a sensory image in his mind. Like when we read about the green leaves, when we read about the water dripping from leaves, so we make an image in our mind, so we come to recognize those things very quickly. So multiple meaning is a very important aspect of this. We'll be looking for metaphors. These comparison between two different unlike things create meaning. Like when we say this classroom is a zoo. So we have made a comparison between two unsimilar items. So that is a metaphor. We'll be looking for the multiple meaning. Poem can have multiple meaning, and each time you read, you can have various meanings in your mind. Language, literary devices, and diction. So L stands for language, literary devices, and diction. Whereas rhythm stands for the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllable in the poem, stressed and unstressed syllables. When we talk about language, literary devices, and diction, it's very important to know that what kind of phrases and specific words the poet has chosen. And it involves alliteration, repetition of same consonant sounds, personification, attribution of human feelings to inanimate objects, and the uses of symbols, and how different inanimate symbols can refer to far-reaching ideas. Like we are familiar with a very important symbol, the road. The road refers to the a person's decision, a choice that one has to make. So it equally stands for a metaphor of life, and it equally stands for the symbol of one's decision that one has to make in the life. Repetition, very important to know. Repetition, rhythm, and rhyme, I have marked it R3. So one can remember it. R stands for three items like rhythm, rhyme, repetition. So rhyme stands for the repetition of the sounds at the end of the poem. So whereas the repetition stands for the repeated use of words. Repeated use of words. You can simply call it refrain also. So repetition can also be considered as a refrain. Refrain, repetition of a line in a word. So repeated use of words or phrases in a line is also known as a refrain. So it adds a memorable and recurring message in a poem. So it's very important to memorize this mnemonic device. So one can have a stimulator in his mind. One can have a stimulator in one's mind whenever one is going to teach or one is going to study. So by memorizing these technique and devices, one can easily understand and interpret any poem. And the second step and the alternate step is another mnemonic device, Peel the Poetic Core. It's quite extensive, and I have chosen this one for my today's lecture. And I'll be explaining this topic in my today's lecture, that how I'll be explaining a poem, how I'll be looking for a poem for explanation purpose. So it's the user's choice, it's the candidate's choice or the viewer's choice to opt for any of this technique and adopt in a classroom atmosphere. So now we'll be going for Peel the Poetic Core mnemonic device, and we'll be understanding that how a poem can be analyzed critically while keeping in mind the various perspectives. So the first step involves to identify the what of the poem. When we talk about the what of the poem, we keep in mind that what is the poet saying and how does the poet say it and who is he addressing to and who is the person he is actually addressing. So these all of things should be in our mind. It starts with the what of the poem. What involves the subject matter, identifying the basic details of a poem. It also involves providing a brief overview of the poetry content. So whenever teaching a poem, whenever critically analyzing a poem, do mention that what are you going to describe about this poem? What is a poem actually referring to, any idea or a thing? For example, if you are going to talk about the Road Not Taken, so Road Not Taken is a reflective poem that narrates a speaker's choice. Is a journey, his contemplation of choosing a path of two diverging paths in a forest. So you will be looking for that kind of what in a poem. That could be a subject matter of the poem. That could be a question, a begging question that the poet has asked or inquired in a poem. The second is the subject matter and themes, and it involves various kind of questions that what is the poem about, and what the idea is the poet expressing, what images, words, and symbols does the poet use to convey, reinforce in his ideas. So the very first line of the poem, two woods diverge in a yellow wood, refers to a metaphoric reference that the poet is contemplating about choosing a path to take in his life. So the second step involves tone, the voice or sound of the poem, serious, mocking, or humorous. It's very recognizable. You can have a look at any of the poem. You can understand that whether it's humorous, whether it's some kind of mocking, ironic, or contemplative. Whereas I've already talked about the subject matter and themes in my previous slides, so that I will not be focusing on this. These are the recurrent or universal ideas addressed in a poem, so we can have that aspect in our mind. So analyzing the tone will help us to identify whether the poem is a contemplative. So the Road Not Taken is a contemplative poem. the speaker reflects on the significance of the chosen path. So it's very important to know that whether the tone is sullen, panicky, serious, mocking, humorous, ironic, or whatever you have in your mind by reading a poem. So the fourth step involves identifying the mood of the poem. It's very important to know whether the mood is eerie, peaceful, or thoughtful. It involves some kind of a contemplative process. Whether the poet is reflective or nostalgic or invoking a sense of uh, reminding to the past. So it's very important to evaluate the mood. So does it invoke a sense of melancholy, uncertainty, or any emotional response? So it can be read by reading one or two quatrains or three quatrains in a shorter poem. It can be understood. It can be understood in just reading 2 to 3 couplets. And there comes technique. Technique involves a poet to communicate his ideas effectively. He might use alliteration, he might use enjambment, he might use repetition, he might use the language or symbolism, metaphor, personification, stylistic devices, and other things to convey his ideas. So technique involves a variety of items that we should keep in our mind whenever we are going to critically analyze a poem. So it's very important to keep all of those things in mind. Like Frost utilizes metaphors, symbolism, and personification in Road Not Taken. So it's very important to know it's a poem about decision making and the consequences of the choices. So, but I will not restrict it merely to the decision making or the consequences of choices that one has to make in one's life. It's open to interpretation. One can have various kind of meaning in one's mind. So there is another step that we will be looking for that involves a structure and poetic form. What are the number of the stanzas and how the poet has conveyed different kind of stanzas. And this structure enhances or reinforces the themes or ideas. So we are familiar that the Road Not Taken, it consists of 4 stanzas. And with our rhyming scheme of AB, AAB, AB, AAB. If I go wrong, I'll be explaining this in my next slide too, that how many, what is the rhyme scheme and how I'll be able to identify the rhyme scheme. So we'll be identifying that in the next slide. So the structure reflects the contemplative nature of the speaker's reflection. So next step is to identify that what is the use of imagery, metaphors, symbols, and personification. We will be analyzing the uses of imagery. We will consider that how these devices deepen the meaning for the reader and how does it conclude, enhance the reader's understanding of themes and ideas. When we read Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken, Robert Frost employs the imagery of roads, yellowwood, and a fork. So these are the metaphors for choices and individuality and life's uncertain paths. So we will be looking for the symbols, personification, metaphors, and all of those things that fall under the purview of imagery. The next step involves identifying the rhythm, rhyme, and repetition. I have already discussed in the STIMMLRRR device that he can be termed as a R3. So rhyme involves repetition of sounds at the end of the word. We'll be looking at how we can identify the rhyme. And the rhythm involves the beat of the line, repetition of the consonants in the phrases. It involves also involves the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllable in a line. So besides consonant and assonance, we'll be looking for the pattern of meter also. We'll be looking for the fixed kind of meter, because this rhythm creates a sense of beat or pulses in a poem. So it's very important to have that in mind, that rhythm is a very essential part of the poem. And many modern poets do not adhere with that strict kind of rhythmical pattern. But it's very important to know that what we are going to study in The Road Not Taken. So we'll be looking up that thing in our mind too. So repetition is the refrain repeated use of words, phrases, and lines. So this is very important to have that in mind. Historical and biographical facts is very important to know about the biographical and historical detail about the poet, because it helps us to identify that how these external factors inform the poem's themes, and a biography may shed light on the poet's intentions and views, and he might have inspired from some kind of event, etc. So his own experience could be the decision making and the consequences of his choices that he might have influenced in his life. And it might have provoked some sense of motivation that forced him to write this poem. But it should not be the sole objective to identify or to beat a confession of the poem. So we should not beat a confession of the poem. So it's very important. Multiple meanings. A poem can have a multiple meanings, as I mentioned earlier in the STIMMLRRR techniques. So it's important to recognize whenever we read a poem again and again, we can have a different kind of meanings. So it can have various kind of views. It might be viewed as a reflection on individual choice. It might be viewed as a human tendency to romanticize the decisions. So this is our discussion that how we can critically analyze a poem, and we will be now looking for a breakdown of poem, mapping of a poem, anatomy of a poem. We'll be looking for various other things that are very important to know. For further detail, you can watch my lecture on YouTube. Besides having a look at this infographic, you can understand the infographic and the mnemonic devices I have already discussed in my previous slide. So, two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and I could not travel both, and be one traveler long west stood and looked down as far as it could to where it bent in the underground. So this is how it appears. Boom. Now we will be looking at various kind of things we should have in our mind whenever we are going to understand or to dissect a poem. Look at this one. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood. So it involves analyzing technique, a technique of metaphor, whereas the diverging road symbolizes the choices one has to make. Simply, two roads diverged in a yellow wood also refers to the use of very important meter that I have also highlighted that this book poem comes with iambic tetrameter, and some lines contain iambic pentameter. So it's the characteristic of prose poetry. He often used irregular meters to create a sense of uncertainty or ambiguity in his. So next step is the two roads in yellow wood offers a very important figure of speech simile here. The repetition of I again and again in the poem also refers to very important device, anaphora, to repeat the words I at the beginning the several times. Similarly, to where it bent in the underground, so refers to the imagery of the road bending in the underground. It confuses the vivid imagery of nature's influence on the choices we make. So this is very important things we can have in our mind whenever we are looking for analyzing a poem. So now look how we can identify the rhyme scheme of a poem. Rhyme is considered as something that is that repeats that can be observed in the last line of a verse. So it's very important to identify the rhyme that sounds at the end of the words of poem, like fair stands parallel with the where and there. So we will mark it A. So now have a look at the claim and the same. We will mark it B. So we'll have a rhyme scheme of A, B, B that I have mentioned here. So this is the rhyme scheme, and it is repeated in this stanza, this stanza, this stanza, and this stanza. So it's very important to identify the rhyme and the rhythm and the repetition if there is any. We can also identify the personal experiences and uncertainties the poet has mentioned that are we doubted if I should ever come back. So this also refers to the personal experiences that the poet might have had in his life that may refer to the historical and biographical detail. Whereas if we have a look at the two roads diverge in a word, and I took the one less traveled by. So the two roads refers to a symbolic allusion. Two roads represent different paths that the speaker could have taken in his life. Moreover, I took the one less traveled by. It refers to the mood of the poem. Moreover, tackle multiple meanings. It means a poem can have a multiple meaning each time you sit and read again and again. So you are not going to conclude in just one reading. It can have a multiple meaning at all. Like if you just reread that poem in a backward direction, I shall be telling this with a sigh. It means that the poet has chosen a path and now he is contemplating that whether he is a happy or a sad or whether in a melancholic state. So it might refer that he is a sad. It does not sound that the poet is satisfied about the path he has chosen. So it might refer that he still has some kind of sighs and suspiration or some kind of thoughts that if he had chosen some other path, what might have happened with him. So this is our lecture for today's, that how we can identify various meanings in a poem, various how we can identify a poem, how we can analyze a poem. If anyone have any question, they can ask me in the comment section. I'll be uploading this diagram on my Facebook page, Anatomy of Literature. You can have any question regarding this today's lecture. Anyone who wishes to join me for lectureship and subject specialist preparation, they can contact me on my email and my WhatsApp address. I'm open for any kind of enrollment for lectureship and subject specialist, written and interview test preparation all over Pakistan. Moreover, do subscribe my channel and do tell me that what are your views regarding this today's lecture. Have a good day. Allah Hafiz.